Rafael Echeverría holds an undergraduate degree in sociology from the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile and a doctorate in philosophy from the University of London. He was awarded the title of Doctor Honoris Causa from the Universidad Siglo XXI in Argentina. Of his many distinctions, Echeverría conceived and pioneered the proposal known as the Ontology of Language and the practice of ontological coaching. A Fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, WAAS, Echeverría is the founding partner and president of Newfield Consulting, an international consultancy with offices in the United States, Spain, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Venezuela, and Colombia. He has been a professor at various universities, a consultant to the ILO, UNICEF, National Commission of Science and Technology of Brazil, the Monterrey Institute of Technology, the Center for Quality of Management in the United States, and a member of the International Committee of the Society for Organizational Learning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event. Thank you for joining us for the official online launch of the English edition of Observers and the Awards by Dr. Rafael Echeverría. My name is Guillermina Ferrari, Senior Ontological Coach at Newfield Consulting, and I will be moderating today's conversation. This is 1 hour event, so we will keep everything brief and focused to honor your time and make room for the conversation with our hosts and our panelists. Before we begin, we want to thank everyone who made possible this, especially the translators and the team behind the English project. We will hear short reflections from our hosts, then our panelists, and we hope we have time to close with some questions. And at the end, we also have a small giveaway as a way to thank you for those who stay here with us. Today is more than a book launch. It is a kickoff, a first public milestone of Newfield Consulting's project in English, a project that has been close to the heart of many of us for a long time. This edition is the first time this work enters the English-speaking world in a formal way, opening the possibility for new readers, new conversations, and new communities to engage with these distinctions. This is part of what we want to share with you today. The book, yes, but also the journey behind it and the difference it can make. To open the event, I would like to welcome Alicia Pizarro, co-founder and CEO of Newfield Consulting, and Juan Carlos Sáez, editor of the whole Rafael Echeverría's work, to share a few words about these publications and their significance. So Alicia, please, the floor is yours.
Wow. First, I want to welcome you to this house, Newfield Consulting, and to tell you how joyful it is for us to launch this book into the world in English. This publication marks an expansion of our proposal and the beginning of a new stage in the presence of Rafael Echeverría's work in the English-speaking world, which I consider a transcendental contribution to human learning and evolution. For more than 30 years, I have had the privilege of working with Rafael Echeverría, who is also my life partner. Together, we have created a space that enable transformations for individuals, teams, and organizations, always guided by a deep respect for human dignity and the power of learning. This book is both a contribution and a beginning. It reflects a long journey of inquiry and practice, and at the same time opens new possibilities for dialogue, reflection, and transformation. Seeing this work reach the English-speaking world fills me with gratitude and pride. I thank life for allowing me to experience this moment, and I thank all of you for being here in this very meaningful step. Thank you. Guille, you are silent. Okay.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Now I would like to invite Juan Carlos also to share a brief opening reflection too. Juan Carlos, please.
Thank you. I apologize, but I'm going to read, otherwise I won't meet the 2-minute time limit I've been given. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to be here today for the international launch of Observers and Their Worlds by Rafael Echeverría. I am deeply grateful to Rafael and his wife, Alicia, for placing their trust in our publishing house to bring this vital work to English-speaking readers. Their confidence in us has been both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. This project would not have been possible without the extraordinary team of translators who faced this enormous challenge. Cristina Cordero from US, leader of the team, Claudia Espinosa from Colombia, Miriam Hurt from UK, and the translators of this specific first book in English, Sebastian Jatz from Chile and Sean Brown from Canada. Their dedication and sensitivity to the nuances of Rafael's thought have been invaluable. Translating a work of this depth and complexity required not just linguistic skill, but philosophical understanding, and they faced that challenge brilliantly. Finally, it is my deepest hope that through this translation, Rafael Echeverría's complete body of work will finally reach the vast community of English-speaking readers who have been waiting for it. The world needs these ideas now more than ever. Thank you for being here, and thank you for following us.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, for your words. And now I would like to introduce our panel. We are honored to have a wonderful panel with us today. Each person that is here today with us in this panel represents a unique angle of this milestone. Cristina Cordero, researcher, translator, and writer. Cristina brings the perspective of translating this philosophical work. Daniel Herman, alumnus of the ABC program, The Art of Business Quoting, and the first student to work with this book in English. He brings the voice of the learner and the practitioner encountering the text directly. Finally, Natalia Calle, partner at Newfield Consulting Colombia. Natalia brings the perspective of applying these distinctions in English in organizations with diverse cultural backgrounds, even before this book existed in English. Thank you all for being here in this evening. So to start, we would love to begin with you, Cristina.
Hello, thank you. Can everybody hear me? I hope.
Perfect.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to Rafael and Alicia and the team that put this together, and really just for your trust and confidence in working on this really very important project, which is, it's a personal project and it's a life vocation. And that is when, you're a translator, those things are as important as the texts and the words that you're translating. And so I want to talk for a little bit to share with you what the experience has been like to be working on this, because it's really been very unique. And as I was sitting here thinking, I feel like this project, for me at least as a translator, I have translated many books, fiction, nonfiction, children's books, just a lot of different things. And I am not the translator of this specific volume of the Observers and Their Worlds. I'm overseeing the project, and I have been honored with translating a forthcoming book about Nietzsche, which I urge everybody who's here to read it when it comes out. But today we're talking about Observers and Their Worlds. And, I was thinking about how this project is about words, of course, words and ideas, but but it's also been very much about collaboration and about learning, all of which are topics that are infused in the book, in this book and all of the books that we'll be working on. And so I wanted to start out by explaining what a strange experience and an interesting experience it's been, because normally as translators, we all work by ourselves. Translation is generally perceived as a solitary effort. And this, I actually don't translate that many books anymore. I work on a lot of different projects, but this one was extremely appealing to me because of the importance of the texts themselves and the author that I would be working with, but also because it gave me a chance to work on a book in a community of translators. And so I came into this project and there was a translator and an editor, and together we learned how to put together a process of translating that is very different to what it normally is. So mostly translators work alone. You work in your little cave and you get used to making decisions unilaterally. And often, because as a translator, you work with an author in a target language, in this case, Spanish, who may or may not speak English. In our case, we had a team that did speak English. Rafael and Alicia know plenty of English. So they were there to help us navigate different translation issues, but also there was a space for us to collaborate as a team and to talk about things that normally, as a translator, you have to make decisions by yourself, and you're really making decisions into a void. And so in this project, not only was there not a void in terms of translating from Spanish into English, like this term or that term, but we had the opportunity to engage with Rafael himself and to probe specific questions about, the nuance of this or that word. And I'll give you a few examples in a second. But that's the first thing that I wanted to mention, so that, suddenly translation, which used to be, a task of scribes working with pen and paper, we were suddenly working together, not always with pen and paper, actually, but on our computers. And, I think the elephant in the room of any translation conversation now is, well, what about the computers? And that's the second thing that I wanted to talk about, which is that many people think, and in some cases rightly, that translation can be a very automatic endeavor. I mean, if anybody tries it out, you can go to plenty of LLMs, there's lots of them, and ask for a translation, and you can give a great prompt and get a great answer. But when you're dealing with a long text and something that has so many layers of understanding, there are inevitably going to be things that technology can do for you. And there are inevitably going to be things, not only that technology can't do for you, but that not even, dictionaries and peers can do for you, but that, only come out in a conversation with the editor and the writer. And those kinds of things are something that a computer can't really ever ask. So, for example, I think somebody mentioned in the introduction that, Rafael speaks about the metaphysical ontology. He has a book that's called The Ontology of Language. And as we were translating this book, as we were collaborating on the translation, there was a term that came up in Spanish a lot that was el programa metaphysical. And as we were kind of going over it and editing it, and I was really reading it to see how things sounded in English. And I kind of felt like I wasn't fully certain what this meant. So at some point in a meeting with Rafael, I asked him, I was like, do you mind if we tinker with this a little bit? Because it's very hard for an outside person. By the way, I'm not from the world of Newfield. And before I started working on this project, as I think the rest of our translators were in, some of them were, all except for one translator was in the same boat that I was, but we really didn't have a knowledge of the worldview and, the ontology of language. We were not steeped in it, neither that nor consulting ontological coaching. And so I just had to ask all the dumb questions that I could. And I asked Rafael, I was like, what does this mean exactly? You know, if we want this to speak to a general audience, which we did, metaphysical program, which is a reference to the metaphysical philosophers and their way of making sense of the world. Program to me sounded like it just wasn't the word that I was looking for. And it was, anyway, to make a long story short, after a very long conversation, and I think several conversations with Rafael came up with the answer. And I think that it was an answer that he had already. I mean, he clearly had it because he put it as a title to a previous book. But it was in these conversations that things came out. And in the weeks before this conversation, we were talking, and we always talk about translation because part of the process with our team is that we have a team, there are 5 of us, Sebastian, Sean, Claudia, Miriam, and me, and Juan Carlos, our editor. And so each of us has a different book, and we meet periodically to talk. And so sometimes we talk about, the cliches, and there's this cliche that drives me crazy that I know is a little true, but that says, that things get lost in translation. There are movies that have the title, there's plenty of books about it. And I feel like this book was a little bit of a discovery into being found in translation, not in the sense that we found new things, but I think that the process of translation and of working with language, which I know many people in the audience will understand because you work with language as a part of your ontological coaching. But we found, new ways of looking into the book only because we were looking at it from a new lens and through a different language. And so, that was the privilege of working on this together. And I think also, there was just a lot of trust that had to be developed over time. And as we all read the books, our individual books that we were translating, I feel like we came into contact with some aspects of ontological coaching in a very unique way. And I know that a lot of us, it sparked our own curiosity, feeling that, we've lived with these books ourselves. So, I'd like to end with that and just, invite the conversation to continue because, it's been as much of a collaborative and a learning experience for me. And I think I speak for the translators as well. It's been, such a great pleasure and an honor. And I thank you all for listening. And I'm eager to hear what everyone else has to say about this tremendous project that I'm so pleased that it's reaching an English language audience. And I hope this is the first of many presentations that we can do together.
Thank you, Cristina. It's really nice and interesting listening to you and to the challenge that this book has proposed to you. It's much more than a translation. It's really an interpretation, not just put into words. Thank you very much, Cristina.
Thank you.
Well, now we would like to invite Daniel. Daniel, you are in a unique position. You are the first student to work with this book in English, yes. Part of your learning process. So yes. you have a very special place here.
No, thanks, Guillermina, and thanks for having the opportunity today to talk about that. And I want to go one step back, basically, why I was the first student who had that opportunity working with that book. Because when I signed up for the ABC course, business coaching course, I quickly realized that even though I do speak some Spanish, that the whole material is so profound that I really need to ensure I understand everything. And reading in Spanish would help me to understand the basic concepts, but then reading it later on in English really made a difference for me understanding everything a bit better. And the problem which I encountered it was when I first read it in Spanish, I would not be able to comprehend all the material. And then I started to look online. I started to look for books, and I wanted to grasp or to better understand the whole material we were talking about in the course. And this showed me that there was a real need for any kind of English translation of this book, and not only this book, but in general about the book about ontological coaching. And when I then had the opportunity to get the first copy of the book, I was really, really appreciated. And thanks to Alicia and Rafael for giving me the opportunity working with that book throughout that course, because it really had a big impact on me personally. But on top, I really believe that this book is very much needed. And what I would like to do now is I would like to give 3 examples on what happened with me while I would be reading that book. And it's about the change I have been going through. It's about, I would say, the transformational experiences or realizations which I would have, which you, I believe, also only can have when you really get into the content and reflect on what you're reading. And the first story I want to tell is about me as a person reading the book and my reflection on language, because I'm a German person and I lived in by now 5 countries. And when I was young, I decided that wherever I live, I would love to speak the language. So I would be living in Russia and I would start to speak Russian, or I would live in China and I would start to learn Mandarin. And I always thought my key of understanding the culture of that specific country where I am would be to speak the language. And while this would help me to understand what the people were saying, I would often find myself in situations where I still really didn't understand what was happening. I would say I understood the words, but not the meaning behind them, and also not the emotional backgrounds of the conversations. And ontological coaching, and then together with this book, gave me this missing distinction that language is never neutral, and it always comes from the way on do we observe the world. And two people can basically speak the same language, but they can be still very different in the words what they're using based on their interpretations. And that basically made a huge realization of me that I believe reading this book would not only would be equal to learning a new language, would be equal to seeing the world with a different interpretation and being able to interact and communicate and relate to other people in a different way. And for that, I'm very thankful. And I think that this book really has opened my mind in that respect. The second point I would like to share is when we look at the Modelo OSAR, which is described in the book, and that there is different kind of learnings which we can create. And it's beautiful also how Rafael writes in the first chapter that knowledge is very persistent. It's very hard to change our point of view. Once we have knowledge or once we have interpretation, it's very hard to change that, and that there are different kind of learnings through which we can go through. There's learnings of the first order, learnings of second order, transformational learnings. And reading this made not only reflect me on myself, but would also make me reflect very much on my leadership style. Because in the past, whenever I would give feedback, I learned, like probably most of the people in another coaching seminar, I would learn how to give feedback, and that you say something positive, then something what you would like the other person to improve, and something negative. And looking at this and reading further, I realized that probably following this strategy was very wrong, because the way I would give feedback would always be trying another person to have a learning of the first order and just to correct a certain action, but never go deeper in the motivations and why actions are taken in a certain way. And this completely changed the way how I do give today feedback to other people. And in fact, it's now at the end of the year, and I had a lot of performance conversations with my team. And I noticed in myself that I had very different performance evaluation conversations with my team, which would very much not focus only on actions and how to correct them. We would start to talk about the emotions. We would start to talk about interpretations. We would start to talk about what we could have done. And we opened a lot of more actions and had much better conversations. I would still say I wasn't successful in all of them, but at least in 3 out of the 5, I would say these were the best conversations I've ever had, thanks to this realization that on how to give better feedback based on the modello self. And the last point I want to share a little bit is on judgments. Reading about judgments and how judgments define our life, define our interpretation, and also define to believe what is possible and what not. And while we were reading and the book and working in the course with the book, we also had the exercise to speak with our teams at work about judgments. So I have held a session with my team, and we were speaking about what are the judgments we have at us as a team. And the team came up with the judgment that we don't communicate well. That was the exact statement of what we would say in the meeting. And in the past, we would have therefore, having that judgment, taken action such as having more meetings, trying to write more emails, trying to speak more, but they would not help. Based on our judgments, we would take the same actions all the time. But then by looking into this judgment and understanding what was really happening, what was our interpretation, we were able to actually identify that there was a lack of trust. There was a lack of trust of having the right conversations at the right point of time. And by having the safe environment and psychological safety in the team. So understanding that the judgment we had about ourselves, we basically find how we saw the world, and we would be very limited in our action. Looking into the judgment, distinguishing it much better, we would come up with solutions on how do we work on psychological safety, changing the beliefs we had about ourselves and enabling us also to work on the things which were needed. And that was really, really, really impactful. And I'm extremely happy of having these realizations while reading this book. I do think, and that's my very honest belief, reading this book can change your life if you take the time to reflect on it in a very profound way. And I do believe also I will read it a second time. And this will again change my perception on a lot of things, because it's very profound, it's very deep, and I feel like I've opened the door with the first time, and now I want to explore the whole world a little bit more. Yes, and thanks again for the opportunity to share a little bit how it was for me to work with the book during the course, and having the opportunity also to share today about this tremendous learnings I've had through that time.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's really so nice to listen to you and to listen to your experience, your personal experience during this journey in the program and with the book. So thank you very much. It's very worth it. Well, okay, now we have the opportunity to listen to Natalia Case. Natalia is going to bring us the perspective of this work with multicultural teams, yes, even before the book existed. So, Natalia, we are ready to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Guille, very much. It's so nice to see you all. And the first thing I want to say that it was such a delight to read this book in English. It is going to make our life so much easier if we work in English-speaking countries. So, and you can read it so easily. It's so fluid. That is the magic of English. So very welcome, and thank you to the translators, because it has been a great experience. I want to share with you 2 short stories about the value of ontology and of the huge idea of the observer, what it means in real life. We talk a lot with Alicia and Rafael and with the team that the academic contribution of ontology is immense. But it's the real value is in our everyday life, in the way we relate to others, in the coexistence that we can build with others. in that is a big tool to change the way we observe the world, and that we can contribute to transform humanity. We have had the privilege in Colombia to work with some of the main organizations, public, private, and we had starting 2 years ago, the opportunity to work with a very important company, Colombian company, that owns several companies in the United States. And we were finishing one of the programs in Colombia with the whole HR team here. There were more than 100 people participating in the program. And suddenly a woman came to me at the end of the first day, and she said, Natalia, I love what you and your team are presenting to us. This is great. And I said, well, thank you very much. And she said, I am the HR manager in the United States. And by the end of the program, a few weeks later, she came to me and she asked, my team in the United States needs this program. Can you do this in English? And of course, I said, yes, we can do it in English. I did not know what my yes was implying, no? And I said, yes, we can do it. 1 year later, we were in Houston with an amazing team of leaders. One of them is here today. I'm so glad to see you here. And we started a beautiful process that was very challenging at the same time. I was there in the opening the workshop, giving the introduction, I asked the leaders, what do you expect from this program? What is it you want? What do you want us to work on? And one of the leaders said, I want you to surprise me, because I have seen all the leadership models. I think I have gone through all the tools. I know all the tips. I want you to surprise me. And then another leader, great leader also, he was a geophysicist, I think, from Norway, a Nordic person. He said in a very direct way, we are here in the second floor of this building. My office is in the 55th floor. My expectation is that I don't feel the urgent need to run away back to the 55th floor. I want to feel the desire to stay here these 2 days. And I said, oh my God. And I thought of Alicia and Rafael in that moment. And I said, Alicia and Rafael, help us, because the challenge is huge. These people are geophysicists, geologists, scientists. Most of them have PhDs. What can we teach them? What can we show them that is new for them? How can we touch their lives, and how can we touch these leaders that have a lot more experience than we do in leadership? And I was thinking all about this in silence and looking at the team, and I looked at the Newfield team there, Claudia Saldaña, who is here, Nicolás, who is here also, Carlos Villanueva, and we were all listening. And I was thinking, what is in their words? What is it really behind their questions, behind their expectations? What are their beliefs? What are their worries? What are their challenges right now in this multicultural organization? What are their sorrows, their desires, their aspirations for the future, their dreams? What I was doing there was trying to feel and connect with their observers. And also, at the same time, I was looking to my own observer and asking myself, what do they make me feel? What does their presence convey to me? And I think Nico, Claudia, and Carlos had the same questions because we talked about that a lot. And from that day on, the four of us starting having deep conversations of how we could connect deeply with this group of leaders. What were their needs? What their interests? And we designed exercises and conversations and gave talks that tried to connect with their reality and give them tools and more experience for their everyday job. 3 months later, when we were closing the program, the same two leaders that expressed their expectations in the beginning said, you surprised us and you went beyond our expectations by far. But also, the other leader said, I never felt the need to go back to the 55th floor. I felt interpreted, and I felt that you went deeply into you could read our needs and our ambition to learn more. And the second experience that I think I'm running out of time now, but was when a religious congregation last year contacted us. They work in 85 countries. They are spiritual leaders, women that work with vulnerable children and women in these countries. And in our first meeting, I was in the meeting with the congregational leaders. They are in Rome. And they asked me many questions, as never before. And they asked us, for example, how do you manage, how would you do to understand who we are, who understand our culture, to understand the way we live and the way we believe in God? How do you generate transformation in people? How is it that you do that? How is it that you create learning experiences? Do you have a learning method? Do you have a learning model? How would you relate to us? And I have never received some questions so deep and confronting. And from that day on, we started a 5-month journey of mutual transformation. And with all the team of Newfield that participated in that beautiful program throughout Latin America, many of them are here today, we could have a deep experience of ontology, of when the ontological approach comes to life and allows us to relate with deep respect, with curiosity, with a group of observers that have a very different life, a different way of relating to each other, of experiencing joy, of experiencing suffering, of experiencing silence, and of relating to God and transcendence and mystery in such a different way from ours. By the end of the program, one of the leaders in Rome told us, we felt deeply respected by you. We didn't feel judged. We didn't feel prejudiced. We didn't feel that we were criticized for who we are. And that has no price. That is, I mean, what we would love from all our students to express. So this book and all the books and all the other projects that contain the ontological project and approach allow us to have the deepest human encounters that we can imagine, and with this respect, and to build spaces and opportunities of peaceful coexistence. That is what we think we all need right now, and we would like to see right now in our communities, in our countries, and in the world.
Thank you, Natalia, very much. Really amazing listen to you and to the two experiences that you share, that at first sight we could think they are so different, but at the end we connect to people, and then is when we connect, yes, and when we can work with them. Thank you, Natalia, very much. And okay, thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Daniel, also for being part of this panel. And of course, we would like to listen to Rafael Echeverría to add a closing reflection. He is here today with us, and it would be an honor, Rafael, to listen to you in this event.
And you listen to me? Okay, thank you. The first thing I must share with you is how moved I'm now listening to what you have said. I was not expecting this kind of dialogue. And I think that the fact that it happened is perhaps the most important thing we need to talk about. For me, it's very important to have this book in English. And listening to you all, I realized that somehow you all knew what you wanted to say. You had anticipated the kind of experiences that you have connected with the learning that we share with all of you. And that was not what really happened to me listening to you. I first thought that I needed to take this book and tell you what it deals with, the kind of ideas that I developed, their importance. But if I were to do that, I would be making a big mistake. And somehow it would mean that I didn't listen to what you just said. What I want to speak about is not about ideas. And I have lots of ideas. What I want to speak about is how it was life that made those ideas necessary. How what we have done is so much connected with life itself. It's not something that reading a book, speaking with someone, you find something interesting that you can connect with something else. At least that's not the way that I see the things that I write. There's a book that is based upon my PhD work in England that ended up in a completely unexpected result. When I went to England to get my PhD, we had just had the military coup here in Chile. And I was very affected by that. I was a leader at the Catholic university where I worked about the experience that we had had before the coup. But most of all, about the things that many of us find we must face each other about that experience. And I decided to write my PhD thesis on something that I felt was very important. I was a Marxist then, and I've been leaning into Marxism from 1961. And the coup happened in 1973. And I was invited as a visiting scholar to Stanford. Even though they knew what my ideas were. And when I had to decide the subject I needed to deal with, I said to myself, I need to show that what I embraced, Marxism, is not just anything. It has a big importance that differentiates it from many other things. And that was the fact that Marxism, to me, vindicated that it was not just a way of seeing things, but it meant to be science. It was a scientific effort to understand reality. And my PhD was about Marx's concept of science. And I started feeling that I came from something very firm, very solid, that I needed to share with many other people. But I ended up in a completely different place. The PhD ended in early 1978, but already in early 1976, 2 years after I had gotten to England, I went through a huge shift. Because something completely different from what I expected happened. I tell this story perhaps in a more compact way in the introduction of a book that I wrote. But for me, it's very important because it's about my life. The title is Marx's Alleged Concept of Science. And the key word is, of course, alleged. When the coup happened, the whole period of the Salvador Allende government in Chile was very important for me. And I felt having a huge, important adventure. But when the coup happened, one of the things that I had realized was that everything that happened since that moment, I was responsible for. And I have told this story several times, how we participated in different marches in very important streets. And one of the things that we shouted was, and I will say it in Spanish, el próximo desfile lo haremos con fusiles. And I realized that by shouting that, this was Providencia, a very important avenue in Santiago. People started lowering the curtains, trying to avoid what we were saying. And I realized that what we have done and what I was part of was something done with an arrogance, a sense of being right, a sense of dismissing those people who did not believe in what we believed. And I felt that that was terrible. And I felt responsible for my participation in doing that. And suddenly I realized that my belief in Marxism came down and got completely destroyed, even though I think Marx was a very interesting thinker. But I found myself completely empty. One thing I knew I would never do again, what I had done before. And I started to think, to reflect upon those years, to ask myself, how come I got involved in this? This wasn't me, but it was me. And I needed to make a very important self-inquiry into that experience that I had lived, to really move away from that. And I opened many, many routes, many ways of. I started to study biology. I started to study spirituality. I started to look upon myself in a very profound way. And I could not believe what I was saying. How I got involved in what happened. One of the things that I came out from this reflection was not blaming the military in Chile, not blaming Pinochet in Chile, realizing that we had produced them and we got back what we had planted through the way we behaved. If you happen to have that book, it's going to be in English sometime, not now, but it is in Spanish. And if you happen to have it, read that introduction. Because what I have been doing is not connecting ideas. I've been examining my soul, being hard for me to realize how come I was part of that. And all the ideas that I developed doing that are responding to this same concern. There was a moment that I felt that I was responsible for everything. Even though there were so many other people involved in what we were doing then. And then through the readings and through the conversation that I had, I came to realize that there were some people, very different people, who were opening something that for me, that was very important. And it had to do with the fact that they acknowledged that we operate based upon interpretations. And if we want to ground those interpretations, what we find are new interpretations. And if we want to ground those interpretations, we find new interpretations. And they never end. It's one interpretation after the other. At that time, I read two authors that were quite important to me. One was a French philosopher of science, Gaston Bachelard, and the other one, Thomas Kuhn, an American theorist on science. Kuhn coined the term paradigm. Bachelard spoke about what he called breaking with our assumptions, being tough with our suppositions, and producing this breakdown from what we had thought in the past. And I felt that that was exactly what I needed to do. So I'm not someone in love with ideas. Those ideas are trying to help me to find something that I had not seen in the past. I had to give a course in the Catholic University. A friend of mine who was the director of the Institute of Sociology invited me to give a course on the history of modern philosophy. I knew that in that university I was expelled after the coup, immediately after, from the university. Many people did not regard the fact that I was teaching in a positive way. Yes, they claim I was partly responsible for what we had gone through. But suddenly, advancing into different kind of readings, but always connected with this introspection that I was doing about myself, I came to an idea that was critical. If whatever interpretation we have is based upon a different interpretation that is based upon a different interpretation that is based upon a different interpretation, perhaps at the end, we find the interpretation that produce all the other ones. And then studying philosophy and reading Aristotle's metaphysics, he claimed metaphysics is the first philosophy. What does it mean? It's the interpretation that allows us to develop all the rest of the interpretation. That is what metaphysics is about. It's the way we need to deal with the reality, no matter what kind of reality we're speaking about. And I realized that metaphysics was behind what almost everybody at that time believed. And that what we had gone through was the result of believing that metaphysics. And then new readings happened. They helped me, but I was always exploring myself. And that's why, for instance, nowadays there are certain thinkers that I admire very much so. One of them is St. Augustine and his book Confessions. The way he explores himself, the way he despises himself, the way he sees how miserable he was unique. And then there were many others that came. Blaise Pascal, the French, who belonged to a current within Catholicism that followed Saint Augustine, le mouvement janseniste. And then I realized that somehow Martin Luther had done something similar. And then Feuerbach, and then Nietzsche, and then Heidegger, especially in his book written in 1927, Being and Time. And what is beautiful that when I listened to all of you, there was this presence of who you are and the kind of experiences you have gone through. And that's the key of what we do. And that's not because we want people to believe what we believe. On the contrary, find your own way. Live your life with autonomy. We are nowadays in a moment that is critical for humanity. In a few decades, perhaps less, we may start disappearing. We don't know how to live with others based upon respect, dignity, and autonomy. And that's what really matters. Not the ideas that one can develop based upon that. It's the way we share the life together. respect, dignity, trust, empathy. That's the key of what we do. All my books are inspired by that experience. And I feel that I've been the most privileged human beings I ever known, because we have developed, and I was listening to Natalia, I was listening to Daniel, I was listening to Christine, all of you. And I don't speak Alicia because I know her so well. That's what defines us. And that's why we need to somehow dissolve the way metaphysics made us and come up with something completely different than that. And there's one thing I've been missing since I started this route. I would like so much to have people involved in doing something like this, connected their ideas with their lives. We don't see that so much. But this is the purpose of what we are doing. To open yourself to a way of looking at yourselves that is completely new and make you feel that you're becoming much better than you were in the past. Of course, you find new problems, new stupidities that will never end. But that's what we are about. How to live one's life in a meaningful way, and how to live with others based upon those values I just mentioned. That's the important thing that is sustaining all the ideas, though the ideas are not important. It's what we do with them, how we treat people differently. I think that this is something that I needed to speak with you, because when you spoke at the beginning of this meeting, you showed me that that was the topic that somehow unite us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafael. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us, sharing this evening and your reflections, and a tremendous way to close all the happenings that we have today. Thank you very much. So as we come to a close, yes, we want to also thank Alicia, Juan Carlos, our hosts, our panelists, and of course, all of you for being here in this evening, sharing this milestone in Newfield Consulting. But we also want to celebrate the translation team too, because bringing this work into English is itself an ontological act. It opens possibilities, distinctions, and futures that were not available before. So thank you very much for that. And before we say goodbye, we will be giving away a five free book codes, yes, to some of the members of the audience, and this will be a prize for those first 5 people who arrived to this meeting today. So Maiva León, Nicolás Hurtado, Daniela Abujile, I think it's right, my pronunciation, Blanca Martinez, and I think there is someone else. If you can help me, Rocio. Okay, we will check who is the last person, and we will give you the price, the code. We will send the codes by mail, so you can get the books for free, yes? And we also want to share, yes, congratulations, Daniela, your face says everything. And we want to share also with the rest here where you can get the book if you like. Alex is going to share the link for all of us if you want to get it. So just to close, congratulations to everybody here. Thank you to all of you for being here this evening. And well, have a wonderful evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much for this nice evening. Thank you.
Lo que estamos.